I never thought I'd find myself snooping through my father's office at midnight, but desperate times call for desperate measures. My name is Marin, and until tonight, I believe my father was just a hardworking businessman who built Callaway windows from nothing. Now, I'm not so sure about anything. The letter trembled in my hands as I read it again under the dim desk lamp. The paper was crumpled, as if someone had crushed it in anger before smoothing it out again. The letterhead belonged to Langston Enterprises, and the words made my stomach turn. Final notice. Acquisition terms. Non-negotiable. 48 hours to respond. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly switched off the lamp. My heart pounded as I pressed myself against the wall behind the door, clutching the letter to my chest. The footsteps passed, and I let out a shaky breath. Just yesterday, Dad had been acting strange at dinner. Mom kept trying to get him to eat, but he just pushed his food around the plate. When she mentioned the upcoming charity gala, he knocked over his wine glass. I'd never seen him so distracted. "Everything's fine," he'd insisted, mopping up the red wine with his napkin. "Just busy with work." But everything wasn't fine. The letter proved that. Someone named Victor Langston was trying to take over our company, and from the tone of the letter, he wasn't playing nice. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. It was a text from my best friend Simone. "Did you find anything?" I started typing a response when voices drifted up from downstairs. I crept to the office door and listened. "Eli, be reasonable." The voice was unfamiliar, deep and commanding. "You're only prolonging the inevitable. Get out of my house, Victor." My father's voice shook with anger. "It's midnight, for God's sake. Time is running out, old friend. Think about your family." The threat in those words was unmistakable. I pulled out my phone and started recording, my hands trembling. "We were never friends," my father spat. "You've been planning this for years, haven't you? Business is business. Nothing personal." Victor's laugh was cold. "Though I must say, your daughter's graduation party last month was lovely. Marin's grown into quite a remarkable young woman." My blood ran cold. I remembered him now, the tall man with steel-gray hair who'd watched me all evening. His son Asher had tried to chat me up at the bar, all perfect teeth and designer suits. "Leave my daughter out of this." Dad's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Oh, but she's already involved, Eli. More than you know." Footsteps headed toward the front door. I heard it open and close, followed by the sound of a car engine starting. I waited until I was sure Victor was gone before slipping out of the office. At the top of the stairs, I could see my father standing in the foyer, his shoulders slumped. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wrapping her robe tighter around herself. "Eli? Who was that at this hour?" "No one, Ruth. Go back to bed." I watched them both retreat to their bedroom, the letter still clutched in my hand. Whatever was happening, Dad wasn't going to tell us. He was trying to protect us, but from what? One thing was clear. Victor Langston was a threat to everything my family had built. And somehow, I was part of his plan. I pulled out my phone and texted Simone back. "Found more than I bargained for. Meet me tomorrow. Early. Sleep wasn't coming tonight." I had 48 hours to figure out how to save my family's company, and I had a feeling Victor Langston wasn't going to make it easy. I met Simone at our usual coffee spot at 7 the next morning, dark circles under my eyes matching hers. She was already waiting with 2 large coffees and a concerned expression. "You look like hell," she said, sliding one cup toward me. "Thanks. You should see the other guy." I pulled out the crumpled letter and handed it to her. As she read, her eyes widened. "Hullisit, Naren. This is serious. Have you talked to your dad?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Dad's face appeared on the screen. I showed it to Simone and took a deep breath before answering. "Where are you?" His voice was tight, controlled. "The letter from my office. Did you take it?" "Yes." "No point lying." "Dad, I heard everything last night. Victor Langston. Come to the office. Now." He hung up. Simone raised an eyebrow. "Want me to come with?" "No, but keep your phone on. If I'm not out in an hour, send help." I tried to smile, but it felt more like a grimace. The Callaway Windows headquarters wasn't much, just 3 floors and a modest office building downtown. But it was home. I'd spent countless afternoons doing homework in the break room, learning every employee's name, watching Dad build something real. When I reached his office, I found him standing at the window, hands clasped behind his back. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Sit down, Marin." I remained standing. "Why didn't you tell me about Victor Langston?" "Because it's not your problem to solve." He turned, his expression softening. "You just graduated. You should be thinking about your future, not. This is my future." I stepped forward, placing the letter on his desk. "Our company, our family's legacy. You can't shut me out of this." "I'm handling it." "Really? Because from what I heard last night, you're running out of time." I leaned forward. "What does he have on you, Dad?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "You need to stay away from Victor Langston. He's dangerous." "So are we, when someone threatens our family." The words came out fiercer than I intended. Dad's phone rang, making us both jump. He glanced at the screen, and his face went pale. "Go home, Marin. Please."
No.
I crossed my arms. "Whatever this is, we face it together." The phone kept ringing. Dad closed his eyes for a moment, then answered on speaker. "Victor." "Good morning, Eli." Victor's smooth voice filled the room. "I trust you've had time to consider my offer?" "The answer is still no."
Shame.
"I was just telling my son Asher about your lovely daughter. He's quite taken with her, you know. Perhaps we could discuss this over dinner? Both families breaking bread together." I felt sick. The way he'd watched me at my graduation party suddenly made horrible sense. Dad's knuckles were white around the phone. "Leave my daughter out of this." "Oh, but she's already involved. Aren't you, Marin?" My blood ran cold. He knew I was here. "In fact," Victor continued, "I can see her right now, standing in your office, wearing that charming blue sweater." Dad and I both turned to the window. Across the street, on the top floor of the glass office building, a figure stood at the window. Even from this distance, I could make out Victor's satisfied smile. 44 hours left, Eli. Tick-tock. The line went dead. Dad slumped into his chair, looking defeated. "Now you see why I wanted to protect you." I stared at Victor's silhouette, still watching us from his perch. Something hot and determined unfurled in my chest. "You can't protect me forever, Dad. And right now you need help." I turned to face him. "Tell me everything. What does Victor Langston really want?" Dad looked at me for a long moment, then opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick file. "It started 25 years ago," he began. "Before you were born. The story he told next would change everything I thought I knew about our family and about Victor Langston's true motives." The Langston mansion loomed before me, all stone and glass and old money. I hadn't planned on coming here, but after Dad's revelation about Victor's past connection to our family, I needed answers. The security guard at the gate barely glanced at my ID before waving me through. They were expecting me. Victor Langston stood in his study doorway, a crystal tumbler in his hand. "Marin Callaway. I was wondering when you'd come. You've been watching our office." I kept my voice steady, though my heart hammered. "Why?" He gestured for me to enter. The study was all dark wood and leather, reeking of power and privilege. A chess set sat on his desk, a game in progress. "Do you play?" He moved to the board. "I didn't come here to play games. Didn't you?" His smile was sharp. "Your father taught you chess, I assume?" "He was quite good, back when we were partners." That stopped me cold. Dad had never mentioned being partners with Victor. "He didn't tell you?" Victor's eyebrows rose. Typical Eli keeping secrets, even from his precious daughter. "Tell me what you want."
Direct.
"I like that." He moved a black knight across the board. "What I want is simple. A merger of families, you might say." The door opened behind me. I turned to find Asher Langston entering, looking as surprised to see me as I was to see him.
Dad.
Asher's eyes darted between us. "What's going on?" "Perfect timing, son." Victor gestured for him to join us. "I was just explaining to Marin how our families might solve this unfortunate situation." My stomach dropped as understanding dawned. You can't be serious. Marry my son, Victor said simply. A year, that's all I ask. In return, I'll leave Callaway Windows alone. Your father keeps his company. His legacy remains intact. What? Asher stepped forward. Dad, you can't. Quiet, Asher. Victor's voice cracked like a whip. You've had every advantage, and what have you done with it? Perhaps a wife like Marin is exactly what you need. I watched Asher's face flush with anger, and something else, shame? He wouldn't meet my eyes. This is insane, I said. I barely know him. You have 24 hours to decide. Victor set down his glass. After that, I call in your father's debts. All of them. The company falls, and your family's name becomes worthless. Why are you doing this? Because sometimes, Marin, revenge is best served across generations. He moved another chess piece. Ask your father about Sarah Langston. Ask him what really happened 25 years ago. The name hit me like a physical blow. Sarah, Victor's first wife. Dad had mentioned her in his story, but he'd skipped over the details. You're using your own son to punish my father? I looked at Asher, who seemed to be hearing this for the first time too. I'm offering you both a chance at redemption. Victor's voice softened. Think about it, Marin. Your father's company, your mother's security, all preserved with a simple I do. My phone buzzed, a text from Dad. Where are you? Come home now. 24 hours, Victor reminded me. Oh, and Marin? Don't bother telling Eli about our little chat. He'll only try to stop you, and then everyone loses. I turned to leave, but Asher caught my arm. Wait. His touch was gentle, unexpected. Let me walk you out. Outside. The evening air was cool against my flushed skin. Asher kept pace beside me. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't know he was planning this. Would it have made a difference if you did? He stopped, forcing me to face him. Look, my father's a manipulative bastard, but he's right about one thing. I'm a disappointment. You deserve better than being forced into this. Something in his honesty made me pause. We both deserve better. 24 hours, he echoed his father's words. Whatever you decide, I understand. I got into my car, my mind racing. Victor's ultimatum, Asher's quiet resignation, Dad's secrets about Sarah Langston. It was all connected. But how? One thing was clear. I had 24 hours to choose between my family's future and my own freedom. And neither option felt like winning. The courthouse wedding was Victor's idea. No guests, no flowers, just signatures and hollow promises. I stood in the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the harsh fluorescent light, my white sundress feeling more like a shroud than a wedding gown. Simone leaned against the door, arms crossed. You can still back out. You know I can't. I checked my phone, another missed call from Dad. He still didn't know about the deal I'd made with Victor. How's Mom taking it? She's
Confused.
thinks it's a whirlwind romance. Simone's reflection met mine in the mirror, which is better than knowing her daughter is being blackmailed into marriage, I guess. A knock at the door made us both jump. 5 minutes, the clerk called. I found Asher waiting in the hallway, looking uncomfortable in his suit. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd slept about as well as I had. Ready? He asked.
No.
You? Not even close. He offered a weak smile. Listen about my father. Don't. I held up a hand. Let's just get through this. The ceremony was quick, sterile. Victor and Eloise stood as witnesses, his smile triumphant, hers calculating. When the judge pronounced us husband and wife, Asher's kiss was gentle, almost apologetic. Congratulations, Victor said afterward, pulling out an envelope. Your wedding present, the signed agreement protecting Callaway Windows. I took it without looking at him. The paper felt heavy, like chains. Now, he continued, about living arrangements. We've got that covered, Asher cut in. His hand found mine, squeezing slightly. The downtown loft. We discussed it yesterday. I kept my face neutral, though this was news to me. Victor's eyes narrowed. Very well. Eloise has planned a small reception at the house. Actually, Asher said, We have other plans. Right, honey? I caught on.
Yes.
Sorry, but we should really get going. Before Victor could object, Asher was leading me toward the exit. We didn't speak until we were in his car, safely away from the courthouse. Thank you, I said quietly. For what? Saving you from my mother's idea of a reception, or marrying you to save your family's company. Both. Neither. I stared out the window. There isn't really a downtown loft, is there?
No.
But there's a beach house in Newport that my mother doesn't know about. It's where I go when I need to escape. He glanced at me. We could stay there while we figure this out. Figure what out? How to survive a year of fake marriage. How to beat my father at his own game. Asher's voice hardened. You're not the only one he's trying to control. We drove in silence for a while. The autumn sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire. There's something else you should know, Asher said finally. About Sarah, my mother. The real one. My heart skipped. What about her? Dad doesn't talk about her death. But I found some old papers. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. Your father was there the night she died. A black SUV swerved into our lane, cutting us off. Asher cursed, jerking the wheel. We spun, tires screaming, everything blurred. Then impact, glass shattering, metal crunching. When the world stopped spinning, I tasted blood. Asher wasn't moving. Through the cracked windshield, I saw the SUV that hit us. The driver's door opened, and a figure stepped out. Not Victor. My phone buzzed in my pocket. With shaking hands, I pulled it out. A text from an unknown number. Some secrets should stay buried. Consider this your wedding present. Sirens wailed in the distance. I reached for Asher's hand, finding his pulse weak but steady. Whatever game Victor was playing, whatever secrets lay buried in the past. One thing was clear. This marriage of convenience had just become far more dangerous than either of us imagined. And somewhere in the growing darkness, Sarah Langston's ghost waited with answers that could destroy us all. 3 weeks after the accident, I sat in Callaway Windows' conference room, watching Asher present his ideas for modernizing our production line. His arm was still in a sling, but he moved with purpose, commanding attention from the board members. Even Dad seemed impressed. With these upgrades, Asher concluded, we could increase efficiency by 40%. I caught myself smiling. This wasn't the directionless man I'd married. Something had changed since the crash, since that threatening text message we still hadn't discussed. The board voted unanimously to approve his proposal. As everyone filed out, Dad pulled me aside. You two seem comfortable together. His eyes searched mine. Is there something you're not telling me? Before I could respond, Eloise Langston appeared in the doorway. Marin, dear. Lunch. It wasn't really a question. I followed her to an upscale restaurant, where she ordered wine before menus arrived. You've done well with Asher, she said, studying me over her glass. Victor's please. I haven't done anything. Don't be modest. 3 weeks of marriage, and suddenly my stepson's showing actual business acumen. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. But there's something you should know about Sarah. My hand froze on my water glass. What about her? She had secrets too. About your father. Eloise's voice dropped. About the night she died. Victor keeps the police report in his safe, along with some interesting photographs. Are you threatening me? Warning you. Victor's playing a longer game than you realize. She pulled out an envelope. These are copies. Consider them a gift from one wife to another. I took the envelope, my fingers trembling slightly. Why are you helping me? Who says I am? Eloise stood, leaving cash for the untouched lunch. Sometimes the cruelest thing you can do is tell someone the truth. Back at the office, I found Asher waiting in my doorway. Everything okay? You look pale. I showed him the envelope. Your stepmother has quite a way with lunch conversation. We spread the contents across my desk. Police reports, photographs, newspaper clippings. Sarah Langston's death had been ruled an accident, a fall from the balcony of Victor's office. But the photos told a different story. Dad, I whispered, staring at an image of my father leaving the building that night, his hands bloody. There's more. Asher held up a document. Sarah was pregnant when she died. The dates. He swallowed hard. She was having an affair. My phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. Ask your father about the baby. Time's running out. Asher's hand covered mine. We need to talk to Eli.
No.
I gathered the papers quickly. Not yet. First, we need to. Marin. Nolan Reed appeared in the doorway, his face grave. Your father's collapsed. He's being taken to Memorial Hospital. Everything after that became a blur. The rush to the hospital. Mom's tearful phone call. The doctor's careful explanations about stress and heart conditions. In Dad's hospital room, machines beeped steadily. He looked smaller somehow, vulnerable. Mom had gone for coffee, leaving me alone with him. I know about Sarah, I said quietly. About the baby. His eyes fluttered open. Marin, was it yours? The words felt like glass in my throat.
No.
His voice was weak, but clear. But I helped her hide it from Victor. She was going to leave him that night, take Asher and run. I gave her money, arranged everything. But Victor? He coughed. Victor found out. The blood in the photos? I tried to save her. Got there too late. Tears slid down his face. Victor made it look like an accident. Said he'd destroy everything I built if I ever told anyone. But the baby was his brother's. The monitor's beeping increased. A nurse rushed in, ushering me out. In the hallway, I found Asher waiting. I heard everything, he said softly. Your uncle, did you know? He disappeared right after Sarah died. Dad said he moved overseas. Asher's face hardened. Another lie. I leaned against the wall, pieces falling into place. This isn't about our company at all, is it? This is about Victor covering up murder. And now we have proof. Asher took my hand. Question is, what do we do with it? The answer would change everything if we lived long enough to use it. Dad's condition stabilized, but the company was falling apart. I sat in his office, staring at the quarterly reports scattered across his desk. The numbers were worse than I'd imagined. We were hemorrhaging money from accounts I didn't even know existed. My phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. Check the foundation records. Follow the money. The charity foundation. Dad's pride and joy. The one thing he'd never let anyone else manage. With trembling hands, I pulled up the files. Find anything interesting? I jumped. Victor stood in the doorway, his presence filling the room like smoke. Just catching up on paperwork, I said, closing the laptop. Funny thing about paperwork. He moved closer, each step deliberate. It tells stories. Like how your father's been embezzling money through the foundation for years. My throat went dry. That's a lie. Is it? He placed a folder on the desk. The SEC doesn't think so. They're launching an investigation tomorrow morning. The room spun. If the Securities and Exchange Commission got involved, everything would crumble. Not just the company, but Dad's reputation, his freedom. What do you want? Sign over your shares. All of them. I'll make the investigation disappear. His smile was razor sharp. Or watch your father go to prison. Your choice. She's not signing anything. Asher appeared behind his father, his face hard. Show her the rest, Dad. Tell her what really happened to the money. Victor's expression darkened. You ungrateful. The money went to witness protection. Asher cut in. For your brother. The one who really fathered Sarah's baby. The one you tried to kill along with her. The slap echoed through the office. Asher touched his cheek, laughing bitterly. Finally showing your true colors? You have no idea what you're talking about. Victor's voice shook. Your mother was what? Leaving you? Planning to expose your crimes? Asher stepped closer. I found Uncle James. He's alive, and he's ready to talk. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Victor reached into his jacket. Don't, I warned, seeing the glint of metal. Security cameras are disabled. Victor pulled out a gun. Just like they were the night Sarah died. History has a way of repeating itself. Everything happened fast after that. Asher lunged. The gun went off. Glass shattered. I screamed. When my vision cleared, Asher was on the floor, blood spreading across his shirt. Victor stood over him, gun still raised. "Such a disappointment," he said softly. "Just like your mother." I crawled toward Asher, but Victor's voice stopped me. "Don't move. Sign the papers, or he bleeds out right here." My hands shook as I reached for the transfer documents. Asher's eyes met mine, pleading. "Don't," he whispered. "Shut up." Victor kicked him, making him groan. I signed. The pen felt like lead, each stroke another nail in our coffin. "Good girl." Victor tucked the papers into his jacket. "Now, about those files you found." The office door burst open. Eloise stood there, phone raised. "Say hello to the police, darling. I've been streaming everything." Victor's face went ash white. He turned the gun toward her, but security officers were already flooding in. The gun clattered to the floor. As they led Victor away, I held Asher's hand while paramedics worked. The bullet had grazed his shoulder, painful, but not fatal. "Why?" I asked Eloise. "Why help us?" She watched her husband being handcuffed with cold eyes. "Because Sarah was my sister, and 25 years is long enough to wait for justice." Later, in the hospital waiting room, Nolan Reed found me. "The SEC investigation was fake," he said. "Victor fabricated everything." But he hesitated. "But what?" "The foundation records revealed something else. Your father's been moving money into a trust. In your name." He handed me a document. "You're the majority shareholder now. Have been since the day you married Asher." I stared at the paper, understanding dawning. Dad had planned this all along, using Victor's own scheme against him. But as I watched Mom crying by Dad's hospital bed, as I felt the weight of the company pressing down, as I thought of all the lies and manipulation, I wondered, had anyone really won? The unknown number texted one last time. "The game isn't over. Some secrets stay buried." I deleted the message, but the words haunted me. Whatever victory we'd achieved felt hollow, stained with blood and betrayal. The prison visiting room was colder than I expected. Victor sat across from me, orange jumpsuit stark against his graying skin. 2 weeks in custody had stripped away his polished veneer. Come to gloat. His smile was brittle. "I came to return something." I slid the divorce papers across the table. "Asher signed this morning." Ungrateful boy. Victor's fingers twitched, just like his mother. Sarah wasn't ungrateful. She was escaping a monster. I leaned forward. "Your brother James is testifying tomorrow." The mask slipped. Fear flickered in his eyes. "You're lying. James is dead." "No, just hidden. Dad helped him disappear after you killed Sarah." I pulled out my phone, played the video Eloise had recorded. "But he's been watching, waiting, like that night at the office when you shot your own son." Victor lunged across the table. Guards rushed forward, but I held up a hand, staying calm as he trembled with rage inches from my face. "You think you've won?" he snarled. "You have no idea what's coming. The board meeting tomorrow has been moved up. It's happening right now." I checked my watch. "Nolan's presenting evidence of your embezzlement. The real numbers, not the ones you fabricated." He fell back into his chair, color draining from his face. "That's impossible. Those records were destroyed. Sarah kept copies. Gave them to James the night she died." I stood. "You know what's funny? This was never about our company. You just couldn't stand that Sarah chose your brother over you. She was mine." His shout echoed through the room. "Everything was mine. The company, the legacy. The baby." He went very still. "Did you know she was carrying a girl?" I continued. "James told me. They were going to name her Hope." Victor's hands shook. For a moment, I saw something crack in his expression. Grief, maybe, or regret. "You're just like her," he whispered. "Same self-righteous determination. Same blind faith in justice."
No.
I gathered the divorce papers. "I'm worse. Because I learned from you, Victor. About patience. About revenge." My phone buzzed, a text from Asher. "Board vote unanimous. It's done. The company's mine now," I told Victor. "Legally, officially, completely." And the first thing I'm doing is renaming the foundation after Sarah and Hope Langston. He launched himself at me again. This time, the guards intervened, wrestling him back as he screamed threats and obscenities. At the door, I turned back. One more thing. Those mysterious texts you've been getting? About buried secrets. I smiled. That was me. Learned that trick from you too. In the parking lot, Asher waited by his car, shoulders still bandaged. How'd he take it? About as well as expected. I showed him the divorce papers. You're free. We both are. He touched my cheek gently. What now?
Now.
I looked back at the prison. We build something new. Something honest. Together? As business partners. Friends. I met his eyes. Maybe more someday. When we're both ready. My phone buzzed again. Dad, being released from the hospital today. Mom had finally learned the whole truth about Sarah, about Victor, about everything. She was stronger than any of us had given her credit for. You know, Asher said as we drove away, I always wondered why my mother named me Asher. It means blessed or fortunate in Hebrew. Doesn't feel very fortunate. Everything that's happened. Maybe not, but we survived. We're free. He reached for my hand. Maybe that's what Sarah knew all along. That someday, her son would help make things right. I squeezed his hand, thinking of Sarah, of hope, of all the secrets and lies that had led us here. Victory felt different than I'd imagined. Not triumphant, but quiet. Like dawn breaking after a long, dark night. Tomorrow, we'd face the press, the shareholders, the future. But today, driving away from Victor's prison, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. The kind that comes not from revenge, but from truth finally seeing light. 1 year later, I stood in Sarah Langston's restored garden, watching the autumn leaves fall. The foundation's new headquarters had been built here, on the site where she'd once planned her escape, where she'd dared to dream of freedom. The first-class graduates tomorrow, Eloise said, joining me by the memorial fountain. 20 women, all starting their own businesses. The Sarah and Hope Langston Foundation for Women's Enterprise had become something neither Victor nor my father had imagined, a force for genuine change. Not just a tax shelter or money laundering scheme. James sent this. Eloise handed me an envelope. From Witness Protection. Inside was a faded photograph, Sarah, young and radiant, holding baby Asher. On the back, she'd written, "Some legacies aren't built of brick and glass." My phone buzzed, Dad, asking about tomorrow's board meeting. He'd recovered well, working part-time as an advisor while I ran the company. Mom had found her voice too, leading support groups for families affected by domestic violence. Marin. Asher appeared at the garden entrance. They're ready for the tour. I followed him inside, where Simone was showing potential donors around. The walls displayed photos of Sarah, articles about Victor's conviction, stories of women rebuilding their lives. Still feels strange, Asher murmured, seeing it all laid bare like this. Strange good or strange bad?
Good.
He touched a photo of his mother. She would have loved this. Using Victor's money to help people escape situations like hers. We'd found more of Victor's hidden accounts after his conviction. Instead of keeping the money, we'd funneled it all into the foundation. The ultimate revenge, turning his weapon into a shield for others. Have you read it yet? Asher nodded toward my office, where Dad's letter still sat unopened on my desk. He'd given it to me this morning, his hands shaking. I wrote this the day Victor first threatened us, he'd said, when I knew I had to make a choice. Now, in my office, I finally broke the seal. Dearest Marin, by the time you read this, you'll understand why I pushed you toward Victor's orbit. Not just to save our company, but because I saw in you what Sarah had, the strength to break cycles of control and violence. I'm sorry for using you as a piece in this game. Sorry for not trusting you with the truth sooner. But I'm not sorry for believing in your ability to turn manipulation into justice, fear into power. Sarah once told me that true freedom comes not from revenge, but from choosing to build something new from the ashes of what was destroyed. You've built something beautiful, daughter. Something that will last longer than any window or wall. All my love.
Dad.
I folded the letter as Nolan knocked on my door. Ready? The reporters are here for the announcement. The press conference was brief. Asher and I announced our engagement. For real this time, no contracts or coercion. Just two people who'd found their way through darkness together. Later, at home, I found one last surprise, a letter from Sarah herself, hidden in the Foundation's original paperwork. Her words, written 25 years ago, echoed across time. To whoever finds this, if you're reading these words, then the truth has finally come to light. Remember this. Every prison has a window. Every wall can be transformed into a door. The greatest revenge isn't destroying what hurt you. It's building something beautiful in its place. With hope. Sarah. I looked out my window at the city lights, thinking of all the women who would find their own windows, their own doors. Thinking of Sarah and hope, of Dad's choices, of Victor alone in his cell. Some would call it karma. Others might say justice. But standing there, holding Asher's hand, watching our reflection in the glass, I saw something simpler. The quiet triumph of truth over power, of light over shadow. And in the end, that was the greatest revenge of all. I never wanted to be the family disappointment. But standing in the grand ballroom of the university's annual donor gala, wearing a dress that screamed rebellion against everything the Mercer name stood for, I knew I'd finally crossed the line. My name is Lila, and this is how I burned my perfect family to the ground. For God's sake, Lila, my mother hissed, her manicured fingers digging into my arm as she pulled me behind a marble column. What were you thinking, showing up like this? I glanced down at my thrifted bohemian dress, its vibrant patterns a stark contrast to the sea of black cocktail dresses and pearls surrounding us. The disapproving whispers from my father's colleagues had followed me since I walked in. I was thinking I'd wear something that actually represents who I am, I said, meeting her panicked gaze. Instead of pretending to be Cora's carbon copy. The mention of my twin sister made my mother's face tighten. Across the room, Cora stood perfectly poised beside our father. Her designer dress and practiced smile making her look like she'd stepped out of a country club catalog. The golden child doing what she did best, making the rest of us look worse by comparison. Your father's department chair is here, my mother said, smoothing her own impeccable dress. The board members, the donors, do you have any idea how this reflects on him? On all of us? Before I could respond, my father's commanding voice cut through the ambient chatter. Helen? Lila? A word, please. The crowd parted as Professor Walter Mercer strode toward us, his university medal glinting under the chandeliers. His smile was perfect, practiced, and absolutely terrifying. Would you care to explain, he said quietly, why my youngest daughter looks like she raided a thrift store? Actually, I did raid a thrift store, I said. And I'm only younger by 4 minutes. His jaw clenched. This isn't a joke, Lila. We have standards to maintain. A reputation. Your reputation, I interrupted. Not mine. A few nearby guests pretended not to watch our family drama unfolding. I caught sight of Cora, still maintaining her picture-perfect pose, though her eyes betrayed a flash of something, envy, fear, before she looked away. Perhaps, my father said, his voice dropping even lower, it's time we discussed your continued presence at the gallery. My heart stopped. The small art gallery where I worked, my one piece of freedom, my escape from the suffocating world of academia and expectations, dangled before me like bait. You wouldn't, I whispered. The building lease is in my name, he reminded me. And while I've indulged your artistic pursuits, my patience isn't infinite. The room suddenly felt too small, too hot. The whispers grew louder, the stares more obvious. My mother's hand found my arm again, but this time in warning rather than restraint. Walter, she murmured, not here. But I was already backing away, my vision blurring. You know what? Keep your lease. Keep your reputation. Keep your perfect little world with your perfect daughter who never disappoints you. Lila. My mother started, but I was already moving. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring the scandalized gasps and whispers. As I reached the door, I heard Cora call my name, her voice carrying a note of desperation I'd never heard before. I paused, turning back one last time. The scene before me was like a painting. My father's rigid stance, my mother's pleading expression, Cora's perfect facade beginning to crack. And in the background, a man I didn't recognize, watching the whole thing with calculated interest. I didn't know it then, but that man, Nathaniel Clark, would become the key to everything that followed. The catalyst for a chain of events that would tear my family's carefully constructed image apart, piece by precious piece. But that night, I just ran. 3 days after the gala disaster, I was arranging a new exhibition at my gallery when Cora walked in. She looked perfect as always, designer suit, not a hair out of place, but something was off. Her hands kept fidgeting with her purse strap, a nervous tell we'd shared since childhood. "Nice of you to check if I was alive after Friday," I said, not looking up from the sculpture I was positioning. "I tried calling."
Did you?
Must have missed it between Dad's threats and Mom's guilt trips. The click of Cora's heels echoed through the empty gallery as she approached. "That's not fair, Lila. You know how they get." I finally turned to face her. "Yeah, I do. And you just stand there, perfect Cora, never saying a word." "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice smaller than usual. She held up her left hand, and there it was, a massive diamond catching the gallery lights. My stomach dropped. "You're kidding." "Nathaniel proposed last night, at the country club, in front of everyone." Her smile wavered slightly. "Dad's thrilled, of course. A lawyer from the right family, the right connections. The same guy who was watching our family meltdown like it was dinner theater." I moved another sculpture, harder than necessary. "How convenient." "It's not like that. Nate is." She paused, searching for words. "He understands how things work in our world." "Your world," I corrected. "Not mine." Cora's perfectly manicured fingers traced the edge of a nearby painting. "Mom wants you to be my maid of honor." I barked out a laugh.
Right.
"Because that won't be awkward at all. The family disappointment in whatever clearance rack dress you pick out, standing next to the golden child and her perfect match." "Please don't be like this," Cora whispered. "I need you there." Something in her voice made me look closer. Behind the polished exterior, I caught a glimpse of uncertainty in her eyes. The same look she'd had when we were kids, and she'd climb into my bed during thunderstorms, though she'd never admit to being scared. "Why him?" I asked softly. "Really?" Cora's facade cracked for just a moment. "Because he's what I'm supposed to want."
What they want for me.
"And what do you want?" The gallery door chimed before she could answer. A man in an expensive suit strode in, Nathaniel Clark himself, looking every bit the successful lawyer he was supposed to be. But something about his smile didn't reach his eyes. "There you are, darling," he said, wrapping an arm around Cora's waist. "Your father mentioned I might find you here." He turned to me, extending his hand. "Nathaniel Clark. Though I suppose I should say future brother-in-law." I didn't take his hand. "Congratulations. You're getting the good twin." "Lila," Cora warned. "No, it's fine," Nathaniel said smoothly. "Family dynamics can be complicated. Speaking of which, I had a fascinating conversation with your father about the gallery's lease situation." My blood ran cold. "Did you?" "Yes. Fascinating legal structure. It would be a shame if anything happened to disrupt such a precarious arrangement." The threat was clear, wrapped in perfect politeness. I looked at Cora, but she was studying her shoes, the perfect daughter even now. "Well," I said, forcing a smile, "I should get back to work. Lots to do before Daddy Dearest decides to exercise his legal options." Nathaniel steered Cora toward the door, but she glanced back at me one last time. In that moment, I saw something I'd never noticed before. My twin sister, the golden child, looked trapped. After they left, I sat down hard on a nearby bench, my hands shaking. The gallery had been my escape, my one piece of freedom. Now, it was just another weapon they could use against me. My phone buzzed with a text from Cora. "Please be my maid of honor. I need someone in my corner." I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about the look in her eyes, the careful way Nathaniel had watched her, and our father's growing influence over my life. Something had to give. I just didn't know it would be everything. The bridal boutique was exactly as pretentious as I'd expected. While Cora tried on her 5th wedding dress, I scrolled through my phone, ignoring our mother's disapproving glances. The appointment had been going for 2 hours, and I'd already downed 3 complimentary champagnes. "Lila," my mother said sharply, "put that phone away. Your sister needs your opinion." I looked up just as Cora emerged in a dress that probably cost more than my gallery made in a month. She stood before the mirror, tugging at the lace sleeves, her reflection showing something I hadn't seen before: fear. "It's perfect," our mother gushed. "Nathaniel will love it." Cora's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the fabric. Could I have a moment alone with Lila?" Mom's smile faltered, but she nodded, heading toward the boutique's front desk. The moment she was out of earshot, Cora's perfect posture crumbled. "I can't breathe in this thing," she whispered. I stood up, moving closer. "Then take it off." "You know what I mean." Her eyes met mine in the mirror. "Last night, I found something on Nate's phone." My champagne buzz evaporated. "What kind of something?" "Messages. To Dad.
About the gallery.
About you." She turned to face me, the expensive dress rustling. "They're planning something, Lila. Something to force you out." The room seemed to tilt. "Show me." Cora pulled out her phone, hands shaking as she pulled up screenshots. There they were, messages between my father and future brother-in-law, discussing legal strategies to terminate my lease, to pressure the gallery's artists to withdraw their work, to destroy everything I'd built. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Because." Cora's voice cracked. "Because last night, Nate got drunk. Really drunk. He started talking about Dad's research grants, about irregularities in the funding. He knows things, Lila. Things that could ruin Dad. And he thinks it's funny." The boutique's chandelier cast prismatic shadows across her wedding dress as she continued. "He's not who I thought he was. None of them are.
But I don't know how to."
To what? Back out? Stand up to them?" The words came out harsher than I intended.
"You don't understand."
"Mom and Dad have already announced it to everyone. The venue's booked, the invitations are ordered. Dad's whole department will be there, his donors, his reputation," I finished. "Always his precious reputation." A sales associate approached with another dress, but one look at our faces sent her retreating. Cora sank onto the platform, yards of white silk pooling around her. "Do you remember," she said quietly, "when we were kids and we used to pretend we were running away to join the circus?" I sat beside her, careful not to wrinkle the dress. "You wanted to be a trapeze artist. And you wanted to paint the circus posters." She smiled faintly. "When did we stop believing we could just escape?" "I haven't," I said. Cora's phone buzzed, a message from Nate. Her face went pale as she read it.
"What?"
I asked. "He's meeting Dad for drinks tonight, to discuss the gallery situation." She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. "What are you going to do?" I stood up, my mind racing. "First, I'm getting you out of that dress. Then, I'm going to need those screenshots." "Lila, you showed me for a reason, Cora. Either you trust me or you don't." She hesitated, then nodded. "Just promise me something? Whatever you're planning, be careful. Nate isn't just Dad's lawyer anymore. He's becoming Dad." Our mother's voice carried from the front of the store, calling us back to the world of wedding plans and perfect appearances. But something had shifted. In showing me those messages, Cora had finally chosen a side. I watched my twin sister disappear into the changing room, still wearing a dress meant for a life she didn't want. The champagne glasses on the side table caught the light, throwing shadows that looked like prison bars across the floor. They wanted to take my gallery? Fine. But they'd forgotten something important. In a family built on secrets, knowledge was the deadliest weapon of all. And I'd just been armed. The screenshots from Cora's phone burned a hole in my pocket as I locked up the gallery that night. Rain drummed against the windows, matching my darkening mood. I'd spent hours going through Dad's research grants, looking for the irregularities Nate had mentioned, but hit nothing but dead ends. A motorcycle's rumble cut through the rain, stopping outside. I didn't recognize the rider until he pulled off his helmet, revealing a face that didn't belong in my carefully curated world of art and family expectations. "You're getting wet," he called out, grinning. I hesitated at the gallery door. "That's generally what happens in the rain. Want a ride?" He patted the seat behind him. "Unless you're afraid of ruining your fancy clothes." I glanced down at my paint-stained jeans and smiled despite myself. "I don't even know your name."
Hula Collins.
"I'm doing the metalwork next door." He extended a grease-stained hand. "Been watching you fight with that sculpture all day." "Lila," I said, taking his hand. And I wasn't fighting with it. I was negotiating. The sculpture was winning. The rain was soaking through my shirt, but I didn't move. Behind me lay the gallery, my prison and sanctuary. Ahead sat a stranger offering escape, even if just for a moment. "Come on," he said softly. "Live a little dangerously." I thought about Nate's messages, about Cora's trapped expression in that wedding dress, about my father's carefully constructed world of control and appearances. I got on the bike. Ryder took us through the city's back streets, past industrial districts where his world lived. The rain stung my face, but I felt more alive than I had in weeks. We ended up at a small diner, the kind that would give my mother a heart attack. "So," he said, sliding into a booth, "want to tell me what you're running from?" "Who says I'm running?" "Your face does. Every time you look back toward that gallery." The waitress brought coffee in chipped mugs. I wrapped my hands around mine, soaking in the warmth. "My family," I finally said, "is trying to take the gallery from me." "Well, my father and future brother-in-law are." "Sounds complicated. You have no idea." I pulled out my phone, showing him Nate's messages. "They're planning to destroy everything I've built, and I can't figure out why." "Not really." Ryder studied the messages, his expression darkening. "I know this guy. Nathaniel Clark, right? His firm handled the contracts when the development company tried to force out all the small businesses in my neighborhood last year." My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "What happened?" "They succeeded. My mom lost her bakery. 15 years of work, gone because some rich guys decided they needed another luxury apartment complex." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The gallery's location, the sudden interest from Nate and my father, the pressure to sell. "It's not about me at all, is it?" I whispered. "The gallery's just the first piece. They're going to redevelop the whole street." "Probably." Ryder's hand found mine across the table. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" I stared at our joined hands, so different. His calloused from honest work, mine stained with paint from chasing dreams. "I don't know. Fighting them means fighting my whole family. Everything I was raised to be." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." The diner's neon sign cast alternating shadows across his face, honest and open in a way I'd forgotten people could be. "My mom still has all the paperwork from our fight with Clark's firm," he said. "Every dirty trick they tried to pull could be useful." "Why would you help me?" "Because sometimes the people who seem to have everything are the ones most trapped by it." He squeezed my hand. "And because you looked like you needed an escape route." My phone buzzed. Another message from Cora about wedding plans, about keeping up appearances, about staying in line. I turned the phone face down. "Tell me more about these development plans," I said to Ryder. "And everything else they tried to hide." The rain continued outside, washing away the boundaries between his world and mine. The Sunday dinner invitation from my parents arrived like a summons to an execution. I hadn't planned to accept until Ryder offered to come with me. Now, watching him adjust his borrowed tie in my gallery's window, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. "Stop fidgeting," I said, straightening his collar. "They're going to hate you no matter what you wear." Comforting. He caught my trembling hands in his. "We don't have to do this. We could just leave, start that artists collective we talked about." The temptation was strong. Over the past 2 weeks, Ryder had shown me a different world, one where success wasn't measured in social connections or family approval. But the stack of development plans we'd uncovered in his mother's old files kept me anchored to this fight. "They need to see what they're trying to destroy," I said. The drive to my parents' house felt like crossing enemy lines. Ryder whistled low when we pulled up to the mansion. Suddenly, a lot of things make sense. Cora's car was already there, along with Nate's luxury sedan.
Perfect.
My mother opened the door, her smile freezing at the sight of Ryder. Lila, darling, we weren't expecting additional guests. Surprise, I said, pushing past her. The scene in the living room could have been a painting titled Upper Class Disappointment. My father stood by the fireplace, drink in hand, while Nate and Cora sat perfectly posed on the sofa. The only thing missing was genuine emotion. So, my father said, eyeing Ryder's tattoos, this is why you've been ignoring our calls. Actually, I've been busy investigating why my brother-in-law-to-be is trying to force me out of my gallery. I pulled out the development plans. Care to explain this, Nate? The papers hit the coffee table with a satisfying thud. Cora's face went pale, but Nate barely flinched. Business is business, he said smoothly. The neighborhood's changing. Progress is inevitable.
Progress.
Ryder stepped forward. Is that what you called it when you forced my mother's bakery into bankruptcy? Recognition flickered across Nate's face. The Collins property. That was unfortunate. Lila, my father cut in. Whatever you think you've discovered, save it. I turned to Cora. Did you know about what your perfect fiancé really does? She wouldn't meet my eyes. The answer was clear. Enough. My father's voice cracked like a whip. Lila, this childish rebellion has gone on long enough. First the gallery, now this inappropriate relationship. You're throwing away everything we've built for you. Built for me. I laughed. You built a cage and called it protection. You raised us to be terrified of disappointing you, of being anything less than perfect. We raised you to understand your responsibilities. My mother interjected. To our family, our position. Your position? Ryder's quiet voice cut through the tension. Is that what you call destroying other families' livelihoods? My father slammed his glass down. I won't be lectured in my own home by some mechanic. Welder. Ryder and I corrected simultaneously. Get out. My father's face was red. Both of you. And Lila, if you leave with him, don't bother coming back. The gallery lease will be terminated tomorrow. I looked at Cora, silently pleading for support. She gripped Nate's hand tighter and looked away. You know what's funny? I said, backing toward the door. I always thought Cora was the lucky one, but she's just as trapped as I was. The only difference is, I'm choosing to break free. Lila, please. My mother called after us. Think about what you're doing. I paused at the door, taking in the scene one last time. My father's rage, my mother's tears, Cora's silent submission, and Nate's smug satisfaction. I am thinking, I said. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking for myself. Ryder took my hand as we walked out. Behind us, I heard the sound of breaking glass and my mother's muffled sob. You okay? He asked as we reached his bike. I wasn't, but I would be. Let's go start a revolution, I said, climbing on behind him. The engine roared to life, drowning out my family's calls to return. We rode away from my past, toward an uncertain but free future. And I didn't look back. 2 months after walking out of my parents' house, I stood in my empty gallery, surrounded by bare walls and echoing space. The eviction notice on the door made it official. I'd lost everything I'd built. Ryder found me sitting on the floor, staring at the last painting left to pack. The truck's loaded, he said softly. Mom's got dinner waiting. I traced the outline of the frame. Did you know this was my first sale? Some rich lady bought it because it matched her couch. A bitter laugh escaped. God, I was so proud. We'll build something new, he said, but I heard the strain in his voice. The truth was we were drowning. The artist's collective we'd started in Ryder's warehouse space was struggling. My father's influence ran deep. Galleries wouldn't touch my work. Collectors mysteriously backed out of deals. Even Ryder's welding contracts had dried up, thanks to Nate's connections with local developers. My phone buzzed, another text from Cora. I'd been ignoring them since her wedding invitations arrived last week, each envelope like a perfectly crafted knife to the heart. Your sister again? I nodded. She keeps saying she needs to tell me something important. Probably another lecture about family duty. The gallery's front door chimed. I looked up, expecting the landlord, but instead found Joan Collins, Ryder's mother, standing there with a determined expression. You too need to see this, she said, holding up a tablet. It just hit the news. The headline made my blood freeze. University professor under investigation for research fund misappropriation. My father's photo stared back at me, looking older than I remembered. There's more, Joan said, scrolling down. The law firm handling the investigation. Let me guess. I cut in. Clark and Associates. She nodded. Nate's turning on them, Lila. He's using your father's scandal to boost his own reputation. Ryder's hand found mine. This could be our chance. If your father's vulnerable.
No.
I stood up, my legs shaky. I wanted to save the gallery, not destroy my family. They didn't show you the same consideration, Joanne said gently. Before I could respond, the door chimed again. This time it was Cora, looking nothing like the perfect daughter I remembered. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her eyes red from crying. I tried to warn you, she said. About Nate, about everything. But you wouldn't answer my calls. Warn me about what? The development plans weren't just about your gallery. Nate's firm is targeting the whole university district. Dad's research funds, the property deals, it's all connected. She pulled out a USB drive. I found these files on Nate's computer. He's been planning this for months, using our family to build his case. My head spun. Why are you showing me this now? Because I finally realized something. Cora's voice cracked. We're not just losing a gallery or a neighborhood. We're losing ourselves. And I can't watch it happen anymore. The weight of everything, the gallery, my parents, Cora's revelation, crashed down. I sank back to the floor, clutching the USB drive. What am I supposed to do with this? I whispered. Even if we expose Nate, it'll destroy Dad. The university, our family name. Maybe some things need to be destroyed before they can be rebuilt, Ryder said. I looked around my empty gallery one last time. The bare walls held shadows of everything I'd lost, and everything I still had to lose. If we do this, I said slowly, there's no going back. No more perfect family, no more social status, no more safety net. Cora sat beside me, her shoulder touching mine like when we were kids sharing secrets. Maybe that's exactly what we need. My phone buzzed again, a message from my mother. Your father needs you. Please come home. The irony wasn't lost on me. They only wanted me back now that their world was crumbling. So, Ryder said, what's it going to be? Revenge or redemption? I stared at the USB drive in my hand, feeling the weight of two possible futures. Either way, someone's world was about to burn. I just had to decide which match to light. The university's annual donor gala looked exactly the same as it had 6 months ago. Except this time I wasn't here to rebel, I was here to end it all. Ready. Ryder squeezed my hand, looking sharp in a properly fitted suit this time. I touched the USB drive in my clutch.
No.
But that's never stopped me before. Inside, the elite of academia mingled, oblivious to the bomb about to drop. My father stood at his usual spot by the fireplace, but his confident stance seemed forced. The investigation had taken its toll. Nate spotted us first. His smile faltered as he steered Cora in our direction. Bold of you to show up here, he said quietly. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. I glanced at my sister. Everything set. Cora nodded almost imperceptibly. The engagement ring on her finger caught the light, for the last time, if all went according to plan. Ladies and gentlemen, the university president called from the podium. If I could have your attention. My father moved to take his usual place of honor, but froze when he saw me. I held his gaze as I walked toward the stage. Actually, I said, loud enough to carry, I have something to share first. Nate stepped forward. Security. I wouldn't, Ryder warned, positioning himself between Nate and me. The room hushed as I reached the podium. My mother's face had gone pale, but she didn't move to stop me. Many of you know me as Professor Mercer's rebellious daughter. I started. The one who chose art over academia, disappointment over duty. But what you don't know is the real cost of maintaining the perfect facade this university runs on. I plugged in the USB drive. The projector hummed to life, displaying emails, contracts, and financial records across the wall. These documents show how Nathaniel Clark orchestrated the systematic destruction of small businesses in the university district, using inside information from my father's position to facilitate land grabs and development deals. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nate's composed mass cracked. "You have no proof." "Actually," Cora stepped forward, her voice steady, "I provided the proof, along with documentation of how you used our engagement to gain access to university records and my father's research funds." My father's face had turned ashen. "Cora, what have you done?" "What you taught us to do, Dad," I answered for her. "Protect the family name, just not in the way you expected." Nate lunged for the podium, but Ryder intercepted him. In the chaos, my mother reached my father's side, gripping his arm as he swayed. "By exposing this now," I continued over the growing murmurs, "before the official investigation concludes, we're giving the university a chance to address it internally, to make it right." The president stood, his expression grave. "Security, please escort Mr. Clark out. Walter, my office. Now." As Nate was led away, he turned back. "You really think this changes anything? You're still the family disappointment living with a—" "Careful," Cora cut in, slipping off her engagement ring. "That's my sister you're talking about." The ring hit the floor with a metallic ping that echoed through the stunned silence. My father stepped toward me, looking suddenly old. "Why?" he whispered. "Why not just let it go?" "Because you taught us that family is everything," I said. "But you never understood what that really meant." Security arrived to escort him to the president's office. As he passed, he paused. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "for everything. It wasn't enough. It might never be enough. But it was a start." Later, in the empty ballroom, Cora, Ryder, and I sat on the stage steps, sharing a bottle of champagne. "So," Cora said, "what now?" I looked at Ryder, who smiled. "The warehouse space is still available, big enough for a gallery and a welding studio." "And a dance studio?" Cora asked quietly. "I hear those are good businesses these days." I handed her the champagne. "Welcome to the revolution, sis." Outside, camera flashes lit up the night as reporters gathered. Tomorrow, everything would change. The perfect family would crumble, the carefully maintained image would shatter. But sitting there with my sister and the man I loved, I finally understood, sometimes you have to burn it all down to build something real. 1 year later, I stood in our new gallery space, watching sunset light filter through the industrial windows. The renovated warehouse had exceeded our dreams. Art on one side, Ryder's welding studio on the other, and Cora's dance studio upstairs. The sound of her students' music drifted down, mixing with the hum of Ryder's tools. The opening reception was in an hour. My first show since everything fell apart and came back together. "Need help hanging that last piece?" Joanne appeared beside me, gesturing to the covered canvas I'd been avoiding all day.
"Not yet," I said.
Waiting for someone. As if on cue, the door chimed. My mother stepped in, looking smaller somehow in her simple dress. No designer labels, no perfect facade. "I wasn't sure you'd come," I said. She touched one of the paintings gently. "Your father wanted to be here too, but community service keeps him busy?" The bitterness had faded to something softer, almost like pity. "He's different now," she said. "We both are. Losing everything. It shows you what matters." The door chimed again. Cora bounded down the stairs, still in her dance clothes, as Ryder emerged from his studio, wiping grease from his hands. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, moving to the covered canvas. My mother gasped softly as I revealed it, a portrait of our family, but not as we were. In this version, we stood in the warehouse, surrounded by art and tools and dancing figures. My father smiled, my mother's posture was relaxed, and Cora and I stood together, neither one in the other's shadow. "It's how we could be," I explained, "if we choose it." My mother's hand trembled as she reached out, then stopped short of touching the canvas. When did you paint this? After Dad's sentencing. When you finally left that house and got your own apartment. I stepped closer. When you started being my mom instead of just the perfect professor's wife. Tears slipped down her cheeks.
I'm so sorry, Lila.
For everything. I know. The door chimed one final time. My father stood there, looking uncertain in clothes that hadn't come from a designer store. I have an hour before I need to report back, he said quietly. Cora moved first, crossing to him. Then my mother. I stayed back, watching them drift toward the painting, toward the possibility it represented. Ryder's arms slipped around my waist. You okay? Getting there. The gallery filled with people as the reception began. Art lovers mixed with welders, dance students with professors who defied the university's unofficial boycott. My father stayed in the background, but he stayed. Later, after most guests had left, I found a letter tucked under the gallery door. Nate's law firm letterhead made my stomach clench, but it wasn't from him. It was from his former partner, offering to represent local businesses in a class action suit against the development company. A chance to make things right. What are you thinking? Cora asked, reading over my shoulder. I'm thinking revenge isn't always about destroying things. I watched our father helping Ryder move some equipment, awkward but trying. Sometimes it's about building something better in the ashes. Speaking of building, Cora grinned. Ryder's mom told me he bought a ring. I know. I smiled. I helped pick it out. The warehouse settled around us, creaking like a living thing. Through the windows, I could see the city changing, old buildings coming down, new ones rising. But here, in this space we created, something else was growing, something real, something ours. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Dinner Sunday? I'm learning to cook. Cora peeked at the message. Are we ready for that? No, I admitted. But maybe that's the point. The portrait watched over us as we closed up for the night, its painted figures holding the promise of what we could become. Not perfect, not unbroken, but real. And really, that's the best revenge of all.